Okay, so what happened to my screen?
Good evening, members of council and viewing audience. Thank you for joining us this evening. If we can call the meeting to order, we'll please stand with a moment of silence and remain standing for O Canada. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any disclosure or conflict of interest? None noted. Thank you. If you should make yourself aware of the situation, please let us know. Adoption of the minutes. That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held January 26, 2021 be adopted as presented.
I'll move the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reno, second by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? Thank you. Mayor's comments. I have a couple. Last week, we had a special civic-minded lady in our community, Mary Sutton, mother of Fire Chief Dave Sutton, pass away. Between Dave and his brother, Dan, I believe they would have over 60 years of service to our municipality. Between Dan as a volunteer firefighter and then for LaSalle Hydro, and Dave, of course, his history with LaSalle Fire Service until this April when he's going to retire. Our condolences go out to the Sutton family.
How come you cannot hear them?
We often do not think much of our drinking water, and I have to mention the following who last weekend worked tirelessly on 4 water main breaks under difficult conditions. Through the night for long hours, Doug Matlock, Jeremy Pilon, Jeremy Reinhart, Alan Rogers, Mike Albright, and Jay Weigel worked tirelessly in this fight against our, we take for granted water sometimes. So thanks for a job well done. It does not go unnoticed. Just to keep everyone up to date, a pedestrian crossing signal was installed at the intersection of Malden and Rio. If the lights are on the poles are flashing, drivers are required to stop and allow the pedestrian to cross the full width of the road before proceeding. Pedestrians should press the button to signal that they intend to cross. Pedestrians should proceed with caution and make sure that traffic has stopped before walking onto the road, and make sure that traffic has stopped in both directions. And just a reminder, retention ponds are not safe for winter activities. Walking or skating on retention pond is not safe at any time. No matter the temperature outside or the surface appearance of the ice, conditions on retention ponds can change quickly and without warning. During the winter, water from the snow melts drains into retention ponds. This runoff is often mixed with salt that was placed on the roads and can cause the ice to melt and thin quickly. Please stay off retention ponds. Thank you. And what happened? Sorry, something. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, first item on the agenda, we have the specialty non-traditional crosswalk policy. We will not be debating whether we should have a crosswalk. As we have delegates here presenting, it will only be on the policy in itself. We have some delegates, but before we start, I believe, Mr. Mara, you're going to make some comments regarding the policy. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So tonight's report is a response to a council question. Back in October, there was a specific request for a crosswalk. That report was deferred, and the council question came forward about implementing a policy. So tonight is actually what Mr. Mayor has mentioned is we are bringing forward a policy. We are not talking about any specific crosswalk in its entirety. It is solely for the purpose of a policy to review future submissions for specialty crosswalks. So going through the report tonight, in preparation for this policy, the town staff reached out to over 14 municipalities, and these 14 municipalities were across Ontario. They were picked for various sizes of municipalities, and they were picked with respect to already having crosswalks, specialty crosswalks installed in their 14 municipalities. Out of those 14 outreach communications from ourselves, 10 of them did reply, and 2 of them had formal policies. The other 8 just implemented crosswalks on a one-off basis. So those other 8 do not have policies. They just went ahead and implemented crosswalks. So the 2 that had submitted, one was the City of Windsor and one was the City of London. So City of Windsor has a policy in place. They have not used it to date. So we did not use the City of Windsor's policy. In fact, in conversations with representatives from the city, they are actually looking at revising their policy. The City of London's policy has been in place for a number of years, and that is the one that closely resembles the Town of LaSalle's policy, with obviously we have had to put the Town of LaSalle's twist on this policy. So the City of London has implemented 3 formal crosswalks within their municipality, and they have used the policy very well. So with that, I will run through the policy real quick, and that is attached to the agenda. So with respect to the policy, it starts off with the policy statement and the purpose of the policy. Those are just traditional items within the policy to explain the purpose and why the policy is in place. Section 1 just covers really definitions within the policy. There was 5 definitions within the policy, so those just cover what those are. The nuts and bolts of the policy start in Section 2. So it's broken up into a number of categories here within the policy. So there is an initiation of works department. So a requester will come forward and submit a request to the Public Works, and certainly it outlines in here within the Section 2 of what items would be required for the requester to submit. So those items are spelled out within Section 2. So the town engineer will review that policy, the request, and if there is anything that does not fit within the policy, that proposal will be denied. With respect to a denial, the requester always has an option to ask to come before council, and certainly if that requester does come before council based on a denial, there will be a formal report from administration why the denial is in place, and council will have an opportunity to hear it and vet through whether administration had applied the policy correctly. If it passes the test of Section 2, it moves to Section 3 within the policy. So Section 3 brings forward all formal requests to council as well. So council will have the opportunity, and the public will have an opportunity to input on any proposed crosswalk through a council presentation from the delegate, the requester, and also an administrative report on how to deal with the crosswalk and what is involved with respect to implementing the crosswalk. Section 4 of the policy really spells out the technical and design guidelines for the crosswalk. In Ontario, the only standard requirement for a crosswalk is 2 4-inch wide white lines that go across the pavement. That is the only standard requirement for a legal bona fide crosswalk within Ontario as per OTM book, as per the OTM books. So certainly any proposed specialty crosswalk will still maintain those 2 white traverse lines across the pavement. And then the specialty part is within the pavement. So certainly there's a number of items within section 4 that talk about how and what they can paint and the various things. And this is the work that will be done by the town for these items. Also within section 4, it speaks to a number of areas that we would control and allow for specialty crosswalks. Excuse me. So certainly we looked at a number of locations and we were really trying to gear any of these specialty crosswalks to one specific location, and that is our town center on Malden. So we have the intersections identified, the 4 intersections identified within the report that we would accept specialty crosswalks. The reason why we chose these 4 intersections is, one, Malden Road was just rebuilt about 10 years ago. So there's probably no need or reconstruction process that's going to transpire within the next 10 to 12 years on Malden Road. It is recently rebuilt. All 4 intersections are controlled with traffic signals. They all have pedestrian signals. They all have push buttons. They're all fully accessible. So that is the reason why we have chosen fully signalized intersections with respect to the locations. A number of other municipalities have identified and just isolated these specialty crosswalks at certain locations. So we have followed that same sort of approach within our policy. One of the specialty notes is within the school zones. So the council may recall that Holy Cross School came forward. The robotics team was successful and they were moving to the Ontario finals. Part of their finals and their success was talking about crosswalks. So certainly when October came around for that report, Holy Cross School reached out to myself and asked about what the process was to get in a crosswalk. So certainly what we wanted to do is, because we were reserving specialty crosswalks on Malden, we did want to allow schools, and this would be initiated by the school itself or maybe the parent-teacher council of a school, that if they wanted to move forward with a specialty crosswalk, they could do it at their school zone locations. And again, these crosswalks that they would be using are again controlled by a crossing guard, and certainly it would allow for ease of crossing for those students. On the financial side of things, with respect to specialty crosswalks, all of the crosswalks within this policy would be paid for 100% by the requester. So certainly that is coming forward with respect to how they would deal with their specialty long-term maintenance, safety precautions, and what the town has to do. In addition, there's a item under 5.8 where the town will hold a 15% cash dollar value. And certainly that will be held in the case of needing to replace and or repair crosswalks in an expedient manner, and not having to wait for money to come in to have to dealing with those types of issues coming forward. So that is kind of running through the policy real quick. Again, I want to close off again that certainly the policy here is only, the report tonight is only for the policy. It's not for any specific requests. Certainly council has the opportunity to approve the policy the way it is, amend the policy with any sort of amendments that they wish to see. And certainly I would be available for any questions, and it would be appropriate probably at this time, Mr. Mayor, that you would hear the delegates.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. You're doing such a good job. You could handle this meeting. But I won't give it to you just yet. Okay, as far as delegates, before we hear from the 4 of them, just to remind every delegate that you have a 5-minute timeline, and we'll go in the order of Nancy Campana, Brenda Bott Drake, Ian Swentek, and I think he pulled out, and then Loyan Fong Tran. So Ms. Campana, if you're ready.
Good evening. I just want to clarify, I was under the impression that we were putting the proposal together tonight, and it sounds like we're not doing that. Are we only commentating on the policy or asking questions about the policy?
Yes, it's only that was what was put forward in the agenda, was only a recommendation regarding accepting the policy, not in relation to the crosswalk itself.
Okay, I think that Peter made everything clear in regards to the crosswalk. Peter, I guess the one question I do have is the 15% dollar retainer. That would be for maintenance. So that would be 15% of the cost of whatever the decided crosswalk cost would be. Am I correct in saying so?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the 15% would be the 15% of the initial cost to implement the crosswalk, and that would be kept on deposit with the town to cover any immediate repairs with respect to vandalism and things of that nature, so that the town can carry out those repairs immediately. And certainly when that is used up from time to time, there will be another request to replenish that contingency fund. It will be used as a contingency fund. Under section 5.9, should the requester not wish to renew the crosswalk, there will be a cost to removing a specialty crosswalk that the requester wishes to not renew and or continue with the implementation of the crosswalk. So that money will be used to remove it, and then after it's removed, any balance can be refunded back to the requester.
Okay, and is there for an indefinite time, or is there a time period on that 15%?
Certainly under section 5.7 of the policy, it speaks to pavement markings are typically last anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It's all dependent on the environmental conditions. Certainly the summer and the winters have particularly are really hard on the pavement and on the paint. So certainly every 3 to 5 years, there is probably a need to renew the crosswalk. So certainly that would happen on a 3 to 5 year rotational basis. So if the requester did not wish to renew, then we would be going back out with restoring.
Okay, I think Peter's answered all my questions. We're ready to put forward a proposal as soon as we can. So I guess we'll just wait for the go ahead to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Brenda Bott Drake.
Hi there.
Hi.
Okay. Well, if I'm going to have to wait, do you mind if I go ahead and read about my proposal for a specialty crosswalk?
You can read it, but it won't be entertained tonight. So,
it won't be entertained.
Pardon?
Oh, darn it.
No, it was on the agenda that was sent out. That if you look at the recommendation, it was just that the report from the CO regarding specialty non-traditional crosswalk policy be received. Had nothing to do with the proposal itself.
Okay.
And I believe some emails were sent out just to inform everyone, just to talk on the policy. So if you wanted to speak to the policy, fine, but I would say we don't talk about the proposal tonight.
Okay, then.
Okay.
I'll hold off. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So next we have Mr. Swentek, or I don't think he's here. Is that correct? Oh, he's here. Okay. Wife's name's on the account. Perfect. If you're ready to go.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, there you are. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I did submit a letter, and I'll read an excerpt from that just for the meeting tonight. I am primarily urging you to adopt a policy of complete refusal towards such alternative crosswalks, disallowing special interest groups from foisting their symbols, objectives, and subculture upon our fine community. I have some reasons why I would feel this way. I believe that this current policy actually creates more disunity than unity. The current policy lacks fairness or equitability in the test for community acceptance, both for a specialty crosswalk and for its adjudication. Many ethnic groups realize their uniqueness as tied to their religious origins. Rejecting religious groups from participating is de facto marginalization and discrimination of the majority of Canadians, which is a human rights violation. Allowing these crosswalks to be funded by commercial organizations or entities originating outside of the town of LaSalle is to allow external influence to shape our future, rather than supporting local community. Groups that cannot achieve funding from within LaSalle will be excluded from consideration towards public status and further marginalized. Creating a precedent that crosswalks are for sale to advance private causes opens up other opportunities for the sale of other public work structures to be leveraged. For every community group, there always exists some individuals with a differing view. Picking which organizations get to leverage public space generates ire in the opposing community, and the town should not be in the business as an authority towards which community groups gain this public presence. More negative publicity will occur if crosswalk designs are as transient as council elections. And finally, policy subsections 2.5 through 2.9 are vague, and policy subsection 3.2 is potentially negative toward both the requester and associated community. All right, so I've got some examples here to present of what could be ambiguous about this policy. Suppose, for example, a community presents a proposal for a crosswalk honoring veterans. The traditional stripes are replaced by silhouettes of poppies, historical armaments, and key years of remembrance. Would this armaments and celebrate history? Is war not inherently political? And do military symbols not relate to political organizations? A different proposal might highlight beer, for example. After all, LaSalle is home to the Craft Beer Festival. The crosswalk features then symbolized mugs and goblets, steins of generic carbonated liquid. Would this generic beer be allowed due to its commercial product qualities? And how would groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or Mothers Against Drunk Driving react? Would a rainbow crosswalk be accepted based upon the connotation toward a sexual orientation, or would it be rejected based upon the religious connotation as the promise of God to never flood the earth again? There are many issues with the present policy. Therefore, I would urge the council to reject all such proposals and go with equity in our community as it stands today. If the council would continue to advance a policy, then I've made 7 recommendations towards improving it so that it does achieve that equitable status and create more unity instead. Section 1.0, the requester must be able to demonstrate a contiguous primary residence in town of LaSalle for a minimum of 5 years before they can be eligible as a requester. I would ask that you strike the word religious from section 2.6, as it is contrary to section 15 of the Constitution Act of 1982. I would ask you to add the word discrimination to the list in section 2.7, or to make use of any copyrighted material to section 2.8. In section 3.1, once a proposal is advanced beyond the initiation process in section 2.0, the proposed specialty crosswalk must be open for public comment for a period no less than 30 days. In section 5.10, I would add a section to saying a notarized affidavit is required that each application assure that 100% of the funding come from within the community. And I would also add section 1.1 created. A specialty crosswalk has a maximum total allowed lifetime of 5 years from the date it's initiated. Individual organization can pay for a maximum of 1 approved specialty crosswalk. All of those recommendations and my overall outline is found in my letter to the town. I would be happy to answer a few questions in the time remaining.
Thank you. Am I saying that right, Swentek?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. No questions at this time. We'll go through all the delegates before we go to questions. Mr. and Mrs. Tran, are they there? I see them, or I see their name, but I can't hear them. They're still muted.
Yep, we're here. Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, and members of the Town Council. First of all, I want to thank the administration and council members for coming up with a draft policy on the proposal of a specialty non-traditional crosswalk for the town of LaSalle since the last council meeting of October 27, 2020, where the agenda item on rainbow crosswalk was not heard pending this policy development. We are respectfully asking council not to approve the PW 02-2021 policy report dated 29/01/2021 tonight and review all input from the residents to council. Our written submission is on the addendum for this agenda, and I hope everyone have a chance to review it. Before we get into the different sections of the policy, we want to first and foremost make it very clear that our comments and input is for the specialty non-traditional crosswalk policy for the town of LaSalle and must not be taken out of context to disseminate any disinformation. So hopefully that's understood. And we will now go straight to section 1 of the draft policy. And I will not have time to go into every word in our written submission. Points of draft policy, section 1 on the definitions. We should add the terms permit holder, who is the requester with approved proposal, and the term sponsor, an entity providing funding but not a requester, to the list of definitions. Next, section 2.1, at the initiation process, forms must be completed by the requester to first clearly indicate what their intentions are, who they are, whether an individual or organization, and disclose any related sponsors who fund the proposal, including if they are commercial, religious, or political entity, to clearly rescind from their rights to use their funding directly or indirectly for any gain. Secondly, we must establish a requester, permit holder, and town agreement, including any indemnity agreement. And the third and not least is the time limit on their permit. So we suggested 3 years, which may or may not be subject to renewal, to provide equitable access to this privilege to be used by any other interest groups, and transparent criteria of selection in place of the current draft policy of first come, first served basis, which sets their permit rights for an indefinite monopoly. The next section, 2.6, where it states that no proposal will be approved that represents commercial, religious, or political organizations. We understand the reason behind this policy, which intends to avoid disagreement in population, which has diverse values. For the same reason, we believe this policy needs to be expanded to include organizations with an ideological or moral cause that is not universally identified by everyone, in order to ensure equality of treatment towards all groups of people regardless of their identity. In the same light, any proposal promoting only a group based on their race, color, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, or language that is not universally identified by everyone should be added to this list, as they should not be allowed. Identity politics has done more damage to social relations in recent years, as it emphasizes differences than things we share. This is not who LaSalle Town is. We are a welcoming and inclusive community, and we do not need any marked crosswalk to validate who we are. We do not want to send a wrong message to any diverse group of people that only towns with such special markings are welcoming them. This also sends a wrong message to the diverse group, separating towns without such markings, as if they are not inclusive. This is evident in so many communities that have already experienced so much backlashes from both sides just because of a crosswalk marking. We are not saying either group are bad or wrong, but they certainly feel that their rights have been violated by a crosswalk marking. The marking on any crosswalk will not identify who we are as the town of LaSalle. The only truly universal crosswalk is a neutral OTM standardized crosswalk, which has nothing to do with tradition. The next section, 2.8, no proposal or marking shall be those of trademark symbols or words. We understand the intent of section 2.8 is so that no one imposes one's identity on others. Our interpretation on this point is that the rainbow symbol has become a social trademark recognized to represent the LGBTQ+ cause, and it is universally understood to stand for that cause. Just like the cross stands for Christianity or the crescent for Islam, neither will be accepted for the crosswalk. Equally, the LGBTQ+ rainbow should not be allowed here either. Furthermore, we have questions on sections 4.5 to 5.5, but due to time limit, I will only present section 4.9. Section 4.9, I'd like to know what are the reasons and intent of the town of LaSalle in making the designated school crossing guard locations within school zone available for specialty crosswalks. We do not see this will help in achieving the goals mentioned in the Transportation Master Plan for the town of LaSalle dated January 17, 2020. Before we close, we want to say we are humbled by the many good works of LaSalle residents. Every one of you are here for this agenda item cares deeply for our community. And I commend Ms. Campano and Councillor Dejale for their good works in the June 27, 2020 Miracle Food Donation Drive, where 340,000 pounds of food donations were collected from all different neighborhoods in LaSalle. One thing we can all agree on is kindness and doing good is universal. Let us focus our energy on this together as the town of LaSalle. Thank you for allowing us to speak and share our thoughts. Lloyd Tran and Amy Fong Tran. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to council. Not so much questions to the delegates. It's more in relation to the policy. There's no debating tonight's crosswalk. So if you have questions to anyone relating to the policy, we'll entertain those questions. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for Peter. Peter, I know that this policy was based on another municipality's policy that was successful. And I was wondering, with some of the claims that have been made tonight by our delegates, did we vet this through our legal department for any language, before presenting it?
Certainly, thank you. This has been vetted through a number of departments within the town, through the clerks, the solicitor, HR, and a number of other departments within the town. So this has been vetted through, and this is a combined effort between a number of departments with respect to what you see before you tonight.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to, I guess, administration and some general comments. Overall, one-offs aren't acceptable to me. It pits us at every meeting or every time someone comes forward, and that's not appropriate. And I think we do need a policy, as even the comments from the people that oppose it, and I suppose there would be people that would approve or want this policy. They would have comments that would come forward. Having said that, we need to have something, and this is a good outline to give us a good start to make sure that we do have something, so we're not dealing with one-offs. We're dealing with a set policy that's already proven, that's already there, and London's does it. And London's a lot bigger than us. So I'm assuming they did it 3 times and had no real issues. So I'm very much supportive of a policy, especially this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carrick. Councillor Akpata.
Through Your Worship to Peter. Sir, Mr. Swentek's point about the individual who is initiating the request, if I look at my notes correctly, I believe, to paraphrase, they need to be a resident or an entity within the town of LaSalle. Did I understand that correctly, Mr. Mara?
I do not specifically say where they need to originate in. So certainly if council wishes to add that amendment to the acknowledgement and to the policy, that can certainly be something that's amended, but it does not speak to the fact of where the requester has to reside.
Thank you, sir.
Deputy Mayor Milosh.
Thank you, Mayor Ronnie, through you to Mr. Mara. A couple points Ms. Tran made that are interesting to me that I'd like to look into. When she was speaking about item 2.1, a time limit on the permit. Are we looking at instituting a time limit, or how are we going to handle this kind of ongoing, I guess, request?
Thank you. First, this is not a permit, so there is no definition of permit within the policy. So there is not an intention to have a permit. With respect to timeline, there is nothing that clearly says what the timeline is. It's covered in section 5.7, I believe it is, where it says that if pavement markings typically last anywhere from 3 to 5 years, at the time when those pavement markings need to be renewed, the town will make a request or will provide information to the requester, the original person who asked for it, to refund and or to provide additional money to do the renewal and or refreshing in the standard maintenance of that crosswalk. If they fail to do so, it reverts back to a normal crosswalk. If they do comply with the submission, then it gets renewed with respect to the specialty crosswalk. That's really how we have this covered. There is no defined limits of 5 years, 4 years, 3 years. It is based on what the pavement marking will last, and that's really what we have kind of gauged this to.
Okay, I guess my only concern with that is I feel like we need to have some sort of clarification for both parties, because what if they think it looks okay and we think it doesn't look okay? Like, how do we handle that type of situation?
It is all based on the town's discretion. That is explained earlier in the policy that the maintenance of these are at the town's discretion. The removal of these are at the town's discretion with no recourse. So that is all covered within the policy itself. So it is at the town's discretion. If they disagree that it doesn't require maintenance and things of that nature, and they don't want to pay, then it would revert back to a standard crosswalk. Obviously, if they wanted to come before council and seek council's introduction to it, certainly they can, but it's covered off in the policy. So we would follow the policy with respect to that.
Okay, and further through your policy, you're kind of saying town's discretion multiple times. I'm assuming when we speak about 5.8 was one of her concerns about the town more or less having an exit plan, for some reason needing to remove this crosswalk for whatever reason. You're saying that the town can just do that if they need to?
Yes, that is covered under section 3.2. The town council reserves the right to approve, deny any proposal and or removal of any already existing crosswalk treatments without any recourse from the requester. So at any point in time, if something transpires, something happens, say an organization goes sour or something of that nature, I don't know what might transpire with respect to that, but certainly if council gave direction to remove the crosswalk prior to any standard time limit, the 3 year or 5 year, we would do so under those conditions.
Thank you.
Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. Through you to, I don't know if it would be Peter or admin. I'd like to see a time limit on this. I'd like to say a maximum of 5 years, because I don't know how many requests we will get. Once the gate is opened, we never know what's going to happen. But I do think because of that, we should have a time frame on it. I'm looking at that similar to what we have for sponsorships and naming rights. I don't know if my head kind of says it's along the same lines, and we do have time limits on that. So when we do this policy, I would like to see a time limit written into it.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Councillor Iricio Spagnolo.
Through you to Mr. Mara. I just have a question. So just to be clear, there's no cost to the town. It's all paid by the requester. Just want to be clear on that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have a comment. With the delegates speaking, there's a couple points that rung in my ear. I'm in favor of the policy, but not exactly as it's written. So I don't want to, it's up to council. Council wants to make a recommendation to adopt the policy as written, that's fine. But I think there's some questions that have to be answered. Time limit was brought up, and there's some other points that Ms. Tran brought up and Mr. Swintek, and I don't have, due to my computer, I don't have his email that he sent out in front of me, so I can't isolate certain points. Just my comments before a motion is made. Mr. Mara.
Certainly, council can provide the direction. We would need to sort through what specific items we would like to address with respect to the comments. so that we can ensure that we're gearing to the various comments with respect to the points for clarification. So if it doesn't propose and or proceed the way it is written, and there is a request to amend it, we would look for some direction on what items we would like to amend as well.
Councillor Akpata.
Following up with your position, Your Worship, Mr. Swentek's point about the initiator being a LaSalle resident speaks volumes to me. I think that that's relevant for us. And again, when he used the example of Remembrance Day and a Veterans Crosswalk, that resonated with me as well. And I'm going to suggest, Your Worship, that perhaps the timeline becomes important simply because as we move forward on some of these monumental Remembrance Day dates that are coming up from the Second World War, it may be inappropriate to have a Veterans Crosswalk in some periods. I don't believe it would ever be truly inappropriate, but if we are paying homage to a certain date or a certain period or a certain time, I would like to see a time limit on it. And I'd also like to see, as Mr. Swentek said, that the initiator be at a LaSalle resident or it be a LaSalle group, something to that effect. So we're able to make sure that it's folks that reside within the municipality are contributing to the beautification of our facilities.
Well taken, Councillor Akpata. Councillor Carrick.
Okay, just further, so if we're going to go down the road of a time limit, then there needs to be an opportunity to reapply for a new submission or application. So you just can't cut it off. If they want to come back and say they want to renew for another 5 years, that still needs to be an option, or 3 years or whatever. You can't just put a time limit on it if they want to come back. We still have to work that in somehow. Like it can't be just a one-off.
Thank you, Councillor Carrick. Mr. Militia, did you want to give us your opinion?
Again, my only comments, Mr. Mayor, would be if we're looking for a more detailed or a more wholesale change to the policy, we will need to bring this back to council. But if we're just solely dealing with adding in a section with respect to the initiator having residency in LaSalle and having a fixed term time limit, we can, again, subject to council's wish, we can approve the policy with those amendments in it. So again, it's really a question of how many changes are council looking to make. If it's limited to those two, or perhaps another one if council so wishes, that are relatively simple to add in, we can certainly do that and pass the policy with the amendments tonight. If they are more extensive, then we will need to come back to the council with the revised policy.
My comment on that is, if we could make if a motion was made to accept the recommendation with changes, and once council has time to review Mr. Swentek's, and as I said, I can't get mine, bring it up right now in front of me. So I would be hesitant to say with these certain recommendations until I have them. I had it already and drafted and highlighted, but my document has disappeared. So it's council's pleasure what they would like to do. If we can make a motion, I'll stop. Councillor Reno.
I'd like to make a motion that we send this back to administration to look at the timeline, to also look at some of the claims that were made by Mr. Swentek about human violation of human rights. That's again through our legal department, just to be sure, and to come back with a new policy that would also speak to how other groups would be able to apply for that same crosswalk if the originator still wants to keep it past 5 years. As Ms. Tran said, once you give it to the first person, they have a monopoly for many years. So I would like to see some amendments done that way. So I think it needs to go back, and that's the motion I'd like to make.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Reno, second by Deputy Mayor Meloche. Discussion on the motion. We've had some. Councillor Akpata, Councillor Carrick.
Your Worship, I'm just wondering how long before can we say it come back in a certain time, sir, or would that be an inappropriate or out of order question to put a timeline on how soon it comes back?
Well, my only hesitancy with that is I know administrations with COVID, they're busy with a lot of development projects as well as other So I don't want to put them on a timeline, but if Mr. Mara or Mr. Militia would be comfortable with giving us a timeline, I'll leave that to them. Mr. Mara?
Certainly, it does not seem that there is an extensive amount of revisions that we are looking for. Again, I have a bit of 3 noted down here. I just want to be clear that those are the 3, and the revisions can be sorted out in short order. I would suspect that we can probably have something back next month, per se. It might be the last meeting in March, but certainly something coming back probably at the end of March, the last meeting in March.
Is that okay with the mover and seconder? Okay, Councillor Carrick, you had a question?
Well, just more than the comment. I don't see why we wouldn't pass this motion tonight. Recommendation. There's already been those add-ons that were added. We just moved we need a policy. We move it forward. We can look at those amendments, and if you squeeze them in, bring them back. I'm fine with that. I'm going to vote against the motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? So on the motion by Councillor Reno and seconded by Deputy Mayor Meloche, all in favor of the recommendation with amendments? And I'm assuming there'll be other amendments that might change, minor ones, but some tweaking. As councillors may send in a recommendation to administration. I don't know if that's worded properly for you, Mr. Militia, on the recommendation.
Again, from my understanding, that the motion by Councillor Reno is to defer this back to administration and to look specifically at those 3 areas. If I've got them correctly, we will examine the comments made from the delegates here tonight. But from what I can understand, council's main concerns are again the time limit in terms of how long how long a crosswalk is in effect, the ability for that crosswalk to be either to be renewed with the original proponent or to be offered to some other proponent, and the codicil of having someone, the proponent having some tie or living in LaSalle. I'm assuming that those are the 3 that we are mainly going to look at. We will review all the other comments made by the delegates, but those seem to be the 3 that council will have the concerns with.
Those seem to be the 3, but as Councillor Ekpata brought up in relation to Mr. Swintek's comments regarding the charter, and there might be some other ones that come up in discussion. So I don't want to be pigeonholed to just those 2 or 3. I see our solicitor, Mr. Didal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just figured I would jump in. I did have a chance to review the submissions this afternoon, including Mr. Swintek's, and from the just to give my 2 cents in terms of the charter review and the human rights review, I don't have any issues or worries with the policy as presented in those 2 respects. So I just want to make that clear to council tonight. Obviously, if the direction is to look further into it, we can, but I don't see any issues that we'd run into there, and I have no concerns going forward with the policy as written. So I just wanted to put that out there for you guys.
Okay, thank you. Okay, recommendation on the floor. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? Yeah, that carries. Thank you. Item E1, extension of radio communications agreement. Mr. Thiessen, Deputy Chief, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. On this report, I don't really have anything else to add. It is a simple extension of our existing service at the existing cost. There's no changes in either of those. So it is really just a 1-year extension of an agreement that expires the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Thiessen. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, second by Deputy Mayor Meloche. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item E2, municipal membership on the Essex Region Source Protection Committee. Okay, I can't get my pages together here.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
That's easy. Thank you, Councillor Carrick. Moved by Councillor Carrick, second by Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Committee matters for council action. Fire committee minutes, meeting minutes. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you see, the minutes of the last meeting are on the agenda. We've already looked at the one issue, the radio communication. The only thing that's not in front of us, and I hate to put Deputy on the spot, but if he could just speak to the two verbal updates, one being our staffing, an update on our staffing, and the other one I don't have in front of me, but if you could just give a real quick update for those of us who weren't at the meeting or on the committee as to what those 2 points are.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. With respect to staffing, we have brought on 3 new full-time firefighters that started in January. So they are going through their initial training process, and we are happy to have at least 2 firefighters per shift on the 24-hour shifts. And just for clarification, Councillor Renner, what was the second point on the verbal update?
The second one would be a verbal update on the progress of the Fire Protection Services Master Plan updates.
Okay, yes, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. We continue to make progress in the recommendations, both for council recommendations as well as the operational recommendations. You know, some of them are easier to achieve than others, but we are making progress on those, and we don't foresee any issues with being able to complete the remaining recommendations within the time period.
Thank you. I'll just add for council's pleasure. It was discussed in the first point of the meeting was that COVID has kind of slowed down some of the emergency action. Not that we've slowed down, but there were less calls and less problems in the community. And I guess if there's anything good to come out of a pandemic, we'll take that one as we can get it. Thank you.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, second by Councillor Renault. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item G1, information items to be received. LaSalle's 30th anniversary. Ms. Hadre.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Tonight I have a report before you about the town celebrating its 30th anniversary in 2021. In honor of this, Douglas Marketing Group was engaged to create a 30th anniversary logo, which will be used alongside the current town logo. This will be included on the town's communication and promotional materials in 2021, such as the LaSalle collection calendar, an updated email signature, and newsletters. We will also use it should any events be held this year. However, due to the pandemic, it's highly unlikely that any major events will take place. So we may continue using the 30th anniversary logo and theme into next year. So to be able to share information about the town's 30th anniversary, we've put together a promotional campaign to share past milestones, special events, and memorable moments throughout the years to celebrate LaSalle. We're going to launch this next week, which is in conjunction with Heritage Week in Ontario. After we launch that next week, each week following throughout the year, we'll share information such as old newspaper articles, photos, and facts about about LaSalle through our social media channels. In addition to the social media channels, we're also going to use PlaceSpeak to share some of the historical information with the community. And this will enable us to use the notice board feature in the software, which will then, we can ask the community to share their stories and photos and maps with us. So with the development of the waterfront, we're hoping to get information from the community that we can use going forward in the museum. So we'll be able to engage the community in LaSalle's past, get them excited about the waterfront project at the same time, and look at updating our history page on the town's website as well.
Thank you, Ms. Hadre. You said we'll get them excited. I think they already are based on the hits we're getting on the PlaceSpeak, so thank you. Council's pleasure. Councilor Renault.
I just wanted to thank Dawn and the work she's been doing with Douglas Marketing Group. I think the logo looks very clean and professional. You know, for something that seems so simple as a couple numbers on a page, I think they really give it a really nice, clean corporate look. And I think it's all very well done. The things you mentioned tonight with the old pictures and the old newspaper articles, and I can't wait to see the banner of the silhouette in there somewhere. So I look forward to it, and I want to thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
I'll move to receive.
Moved by Councillor Reno, second by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hadre. Item G2, summary of reports to council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche. Seconded by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. On the bylaws, all 7 bylaws, 3 readings. Oh, sorry, Councillor Desjardins, you have a question or comment.
Yes, thank you. On the one bylaw about the parking moving from side to side, I don't see a time frame on it, and I know some centers do a month. I believe when we had our conversation at council a few weeks ago, when we talked about this, the term of 3 months came up, and I just wondered if there was a turnaround time that had been decided.
Mr. Mara.
Thank you. For alternating parking, we do it on a 3-month rotational basis. The reason why we do this is that we don't have the switchover between the month of February and January, so that snow plows, when that happens, we got to send snow plows back out. So we try to keep the vehicles for January, February, and March on one side of the road, and then we'll switch them for the next 3 months. And that's how we tend to try to do it, so that we don't run into these problems when that changeover happens in the winter time, when the parking lane was not plowed, and now all of a sudden it becomes the through lane, and we have to attend to it immediately on that day. And that day could happen on a Sunday where we have to send out staff to go do it. So that's how we have implemented our alternating parking.
Okay, so on the 7 bylaws, all 3 readings, moved by Councillor Riccio Spagnolo and second by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Council questions. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had one come through a phone call today concerning what we talked about earlier about place speak and all the great comments we're getting on our Front Road project. His concern was that he had gotten something in the mail reminding him of the project, and that the submission deadline is only about 3 weeks away from now. My only suggestion would be if comments are still coming in as quickly and as heavily as they have been for the last week or so, that we might look at the end of that period, possibly extending it. If by any means, if things have petered out by then, nothing against Peter, but if they've slowed down at that point, then we could stay with the same one. But I would like to entertain the thought that we may be able to extend it unless that it goes against anything strategically.
Ms. Hadre popped up. Did you want to take that one?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. We can definitely look at extending it if that's what council would like. Typically, the consultation periods run between 4 and 6 weeks, which we did for this one. This one launched at the end of January and ran until March 1st. But definitely, if you prefer, we can extend that. That will just slow down the final report that we'll give to you about the consultation and the results that have come from those discussions.
I guess the only comment that the member had made, the resident had made, was that, you know, this is a monumental project for us, like the Vollmer was for us, and that he's just scared that, you know, by cutting it off so early, we may miss some important points. So again, if anybody else wants to discuss an extension, I'm good either way. I just know that if there's a lot coming in, I would like to see everybody have a chance to get their voice in.
Sure.
Can we leave it fluid, Ms. Hadre, that if, to Councillor Renault's point, if we're still getting a lot of, well, you check that on play speak or written submissions, if we are getting inundated, if you will, we could extend it, but we'll look at that as we get closer to the deadline.
For sure.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Renault. Good point. Any other council questions? Seeing none. Statements by council members. Reports from committees. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through you. Just an update that we were pleased to finally be able to have an accessibility committee meeting. Unfortunately, we've had to put them off because of COVID. So we did have an excellent meeting last week, and our committee was brought up to speed on how things are going on at the town and all the updates that are going on to bring things up to current AODA standards and above. Talking again about PlaySpeak as a feature for residents to use. We did talk about the design of public spaces, and I'm excited that we're going to have an opportunity as the Accessibility Committee to have a meeting with Mr. Miller to talk about the new waterfront project and how we are going to be able to work that so that it is accessible for our residents, and to give some input. I think that's very important to do that. And just to let you know that we were successful in getting a grant to convert some of our bases to wood chip, which is considered as an accessible floor, if you will, in some of our play areas. So just to bring everybody up to speed and let you know that we're doing a really good job. And thanks to Linda and Tom Koch, because Tom was helping one of our members in the atrium do the meeting. And Linda's been very good about putting together our reports and making sure that we get the meetings out on time.
Thank you, Councillor Desjardins. Good update. Any other reports from committees? Notices of motion. That brings us to conformatory bylaw. First reading, Councillor Renault and Councillor Akpata, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. Second reading, Councillor Aditio Spagnolo and Deputy Mayor Meloche, all in favor. That carries. Third and final reading, Councillor Desjardins and Councillor Carrick, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. We'll see everyone in a couple of weeks. Stay safe. Good night, everyone. Good night, viewing audience. Thank you for joining.